So my name is Dorothy. Go by dorothy.cool on Instagram. I am an illustrator and printmaker, and I don't know, other things. I do a lot of things.
Yeah. Resident cool person.
Yeah, general cool person. I live in Portland and I make art. Yeah, I guess
Nice. Yeah,
myself.
totally. So when did you first learn about risograph printing?
So I first heard about it when I was in school for printmaking. This was like back in 2010, 2012, like so a million years ago. But it was like this thing that was like, oh, there's this kind of printmaking that's very cool, but we don't have it here, It was like nowhere around. And so I kind of like clocked it in the back of my brain. I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I moved to Japan and I wasn't doing illustration or anything, but I was involved with the arts as like a gallerist. And there were a lot of artists using risograph, which I was like, oh, that's cool. Like obviously it comes from Japan, so it's very much like an aesthetic there. But I was like, oh, that's a cool thing, but I never like tried to get involved. And then when I started doing illustration in 2019, I was like, oh, I'm gonna do it. Like I've got to get my hands on like a risograph. But then 2020 happened and I kind of put it off until last year. And then now I'm in love with it.
Nice. Yeah. So I'm guessing you made your first print last year on the risograph.
Yeah. But before that, I developed, because I like really wanted to be doing risograph, but I, able to. So I developed a like faux risograph style, which is kind of like how a lot of people found my art, was in these like faux risographs where I think like this is one. So is that one? Where I just like used the colors, I pulled them into Procreate, and then I used like textures and printed them out on my inkjet one layer at a time to kind of duplicate that like layering process. And obviously it's not like the same, but yeah, once I got to actually work on a risograph machine, I was like, whoa.
Yeah. What was your first print that you made like actually on the risograph?
Well, funny story. The first time I ever actually printed on a risograph machine was when I was living in Japan.
Oh, yeah.
First job there was a teacher. So I was like in the middle of nowhere, like tiny little country town, and our school had a risograph machine. And I didn't know it at the time. I just thought it was a photocopier and I thought it was like really cool. So I was like often tasked to like make photocopies for the school. So I was always like printing on that, but it was just black ink, anything. But I did like from time to time like scan my like drawings on it and stuff because I was like, this looks really cool. Like my first print after that was this one here, which I did through a virtual workshop with Taxonomy Press.
Yeah. They're actually going to be in our show too. So that's perfect. So what's your favorite thing about the risograph?
I love the way that the colors like lay on top of each other and how you can get really interesting color combinations by like switching up the ways or like the order in which you print them. Or I also like love misalignments. And so in my digital work, I'll like shift stuff around so that it looks like it's been like printed misaligned and stuff. That's like my favorite thing. I did this calendar at Outlet and there were like a couple of them that were just like super like illegible, and those are my favorites because I was like, oh yay, they look so cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you kind of touched on this earlier too when you talked about people finding you for your faux risograph prints, but how would you say like the risograph has contributed to your artistic career?
Yeah, it has been, even before I started actually making risograph prints, it's been a huge like inspiration. Like I've always admired like risograph prints, and that really like informed the color combinations that I made and the, like I said before, like the misalignment. So I kind of developed my style with the intention of someday printing risograph.
Yeah.
It's funny because I feel like maybe it's opposite for a lot of people. You know, you like print, you develop your style, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to print risograph someday. But because
Totally.
I'm illustrating fairly recently, when I did start like being an illustrator, my intention was always to like eventually do risograph.
Yeah, yeah, that's so cool. So what would you say is your favorite Riso ink combination? I know there's a ton out there, but
Yeah. I love fluorescent pink and blue. I know it's kind of like a standard combo. Or like fluorescent pink and violet, like sunflower. I
yeah,
do with my drawings are with like a very limited color palette. So the most I ever use is like four, you know. I'll
mhm,
do three kind of standard and then I might throw a black on top of it. And I just feel like with pinks and blues and like oranges and yellows, like you can get such a wide variety of colors. And
mhm.
that's what it makes me like my brain tingle about risograph is like, okay, like how can I layer this to like really stretch it?
Yeah, totally. Do you have any comments or wisdom that you'd like to give our viewers about the risograph?
Embrace the like chaos.
Yeah,
Don't try and, I mean, if you want to try and make it really perfect, like yeah, lean into that, but like maybe also just let go, a little bit. Like there, that's where the magic really happens for me is when the medium itself kind of informs how the piece comes out. So when I first was studying printmaking, I was a woodblock printmaker. And the reason I loved woodblock is that the wood itself has like a grain, it has knots in it. And a lot of the time, you don't really know what the piece of wood is going to look like until you start carving into it. So you might be like 7 hours into like a 20-hour carve, and you realize right in the middle of your composition, there's like a huge knot or something. And that was always my favorite. So then I'm like, okay, how do I then shift and figure it out? And I feel like Riso is kind of the same because you're like, I have this idea, and you put it in the machine, and then sometimes it's like, eh, nope,
yeah,
you had a different idea for me, but it's actually way cooler. So
totally. That's great advice. One last question. Where can we find you on the internet?
you can find me on Instagram. My name is dorothy.cool. I've shamelessly written it down on a piece of paper here.
Perfect.
I don't know if it's,
It's
I'm on.
good.
um, yeah, and I just mostly post on Instagram.
Yeah,
I'm like, trying to build out more of a social media presence, but I'm really just like a caveman when it comes to that kind of not.
totally. Well, sweet. Thank you so much for joining us again and sharing your wisdom about the risograph.
Thank you for having me. Super, super happy to be here.